Welcome everybody, Mr. Lee here, and this is the second part of the culture unit where we'll be going into the contemporary causes of diffusion, delve into specific details about religions and languages, and discuss the effects of diffusion. This part of the culture unit does get a bit detailed with certain characteristics, so feel free to pause the video in order to jot down some notes. First, we start with the concept that exemplifies the modern day causes of diffusion and why ideas spread so fast, and this is a concept called time-space compression. This concept essentially states that as time progresses, the world will compress with it. Now, we're not a bunch of flat earthers here, and the world isn't literally shrinking, but it means it is shrinking figuratively. Let's use this analogy here. So in the 1700s, if you were trying to travel from New York to London, it would take about 2 months in order to do so. Thus, the diffusion of ideas and goods was a lot slower, and it made the world seem like such a gigantic place. However, as time progressed and we developed new technologies like planes and the internet, now to travel from New York to London is about 8 hours, and the internet allows for even faster communication between the two cities. Thus, it makes it seem like the world is much smaller than before. The internet has had profound effects on the diffusion of culture and everything that is encompassed within it, such as language, clothing, ideas, and beliefs, and these concepts can diffuse almost instantaneously. However, they do diffuse at different scales. You have your small scale processes, which is perhaps only seen in a city such as dialects of New York and their accents. And you also have your large scale processes, which will be global, and this can be seen through the worldwide utilization of English on the internet. Now, these various scales utilize multiple mediums during the diffusion process, one of which is the media and news stations, or even your favorite TV shows on Netflix, like that terrible series, Bridgerton. I've actually never seen it, I'm just a hater, but the fact that I even know about it demonstrates the power of technology and the effects on diffusion, which brings us to our next point, technological advancements. Technological advancements like the smartphone have brought the opportunity for ideas and cultures to spread to individuals and to cater to their needs. And although it seems like they've been around forever, for boomers like myself, we've actually lived through the various stages of the internet and media, and we've experienced the dramatic impact that the internet can have on cultures, even with memes and famous clips.
All right, thumbs up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy Jenkins!
Even politics can come to affect culture, as seen by the Chinese government and their oppressive tendencies towards the Uyghur population, as they are trying to suppress Muslim beliefs and sending them to brainwashing camps in order to affect a very important part of their cultural identity, their religion. You can even see the diffusion and development of cultures through trade, and that as countries trade with one another, their cultures and practices will start to diffuse to one another, as this exchange of goods not only results in the spread of material goods, but in the migrations of two different populations and diffusion of cultures. Lastly, let's go ahead and talk about the social lens of culture and how social hierarchies can impact culture. And in many modern societies, because of the emphasis on money and social status, there's somewhat of a trickle-down effect as ideas spread down from the rich to the poorer populations. However, that is not always the case. The widespread utilization of the internet has had some negative effects on cultures, as the internet generally reinforces the utilization of mainstream languages such as English and often marginalizes smaller indigenous languages, and this is even leading to language extinction. Take a look at this map that demonstrates the use of English around the world, once again demonstrating the concept of lingua franca, as a lot of corporations conduct businesses through English. The loss of indigenous cultural identities was an elongated process that was a result of centuries of assimilation, which is the process of losing one's cultural identity as they come into contact with one another. You can see the process of assimilation in historical pictures of Native Americans, as they're often sent to boarding schools in order to forget about their cultural roots. Then there's the idea of acculturation, which is a bit different than assimilation in that in acculturation, the less dominant culture takes on some of the practices of the dominant culture, but they still retain much of their cultural identity. Take a look at the vast number of immigrants in the United States and how many of these ethnic groups retain their cultures, but they still come to speak English, enjoy American cuisine and music as well. Now let's go ahead and discuss the idea of cultural convergence, which means that cultures tend to become more and more similar as their interactions increase. If you look at the world, this idea can be seen with soccer, as it is one of the most popular sports of the world, as demonstrated in this map.
Now listen. I call it soccer, everybody, because in America, we already have a game that dudes play called football.
Then there's the idea of cultural divergence, which is the tendency to become more different as time progresses. A perfect example of cultural divergence would be the Amish population, as they did not agree with the beliefs and direction of society. Thus, they separated themselves from the utilization of technology and became even more different. This sense of divergence can even be seen in languages with its various dialects and accents, as regional differences led to different ways of ordering a carbonated beverage, as some regions of the US call it soda, some pop, and some Coke. Now, these borders that separate the various linguistic practices is known as isogloss, so basically where the blue, red, and the green collide. Now there's a daunting task of remembering the language tree, and I'm sure all of your textbooks have some version of this in the language unit. However, it can be a bit overwhelming to try and memorize every little detail of this tree, so I generally try to focus on a couple key aspects. One, you definitely want to know the route to the English language. So it is in the Indo-European family, Germanic branch, West Germanic group, and it is the English language. You could even see the cultural divergence with languages once again, as these various languages evolved as people migrated and became separated from one another, thus coming up with different ways of expressing themselves. Some other aspects you want to keep in mind about language is that Mandarin has the largest number of speakers with about 1 billion people who speak it, and that it is a part of the Sino-Tibetan branch. And in case you're wondering what Sino is, it has connections with Latin, as China was referred to as Sine in Latin. Besides Mandarin, I would also be mindful of Hindi, which is a dominant language in India with about 300 million speakers. I would also remember the Nostratic hypothesis, which is a theory that the Eurasian languages all have the same root, which eventually diverge into different families. A mnemonic device that will be useful in helping you remember the order of the linguistic categories, which goes from family, branch, group, language to dialect, is Ferris Bueller Got a Lucky Day, and the credit for that one goes to Mr. Katz from Roosevelt High School. Then lastly, I would remember the diffusion process for the Indo-European branch, which started out in the North Caucasus, Eastern European region, and diffused all through Eurasia, and eventually made its way around the world by means of colonialism. And now let's move on to religions, and the first thing you want to remember is the difference between universalizing religions and ethnic religions. Universalizing religions, like Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Sikhism, are all seeking converts and evangelizing to find new believers, whereas ethnic religions like Hinduism and Judaism are not. And for the most part, people are born into ethnic religions. We'll get into the diffusion process of the two in just a bit. So for all the religions, I'm simply going to describe their fundamental beliefs, so I apologize if I'm missing any important details for any of these religions, and I won't be reading out all the writing, but feel free to pause the video in case you want to jot down the information, as it contains key figures, texts, and beliefs. For Christianity, it is considered a monotheistic religion, which means that they believe in one God, even though they believe in the Holy Trinity, which includes God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. It spreads through contagious diffusion, as it is universalizing, and relocation as well, as people migrate. And in reference to the cultural landscape, you're going to see churches with crosses and cathedrals if you're looking at Catholicism. I would also be able to locate their cultural hearth, as demonstrated in the map, which goes back to Israel. Then you have Islam. So Islam is referring to the religion, and Muslim is referring to the people who practice Islam. It is also a monotheistic religion, and their key figure is Muhammad. And just as Christianity, they spread through contagious and relocation diffusion. And one of the key practices, among many others, includes their pilgrimage to their religious hearth, the Mecca, and this is known as the Hajj. In reference to the cultural landscape, they have mosques, which are going to be next to minarets, which are taller buildings as you see in the picture. I would also remember that they do not consume pork, as I have seen maps that require you to make the connection between pork consumption and religious practices on the AP exam before. For Judaism, the hearth is the same as Christianity in Jerusalem, and the place of worship is going to be in synagogues, and that's how it affects the cultural landscape. I would even remember Jerusalem as a key city for many religions, as it is home to many religious landmarks, such as the Wailing Wall, Temple Mount, Holy Church of Sepulchre, all of which are significant landmarks for Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Judaism is monotheistic because they are considered an ethnic religion, and they only diffuse through relocation diffusion as people migrated to different countries. They are not actively seeking new converts, and the state of Israel is home to the Jewish population and was established in the 1940s, and this is something that we talked about in the political unit. Then we have Hinduism, and this is the first polytheistic religion that we will go over, which means that they believe in multiple gods, or rather deities in Hinduism. However, I will say this is not completely accurate, as technically they believe in various manifestations of a single god, but for the sake of Big Brother College Board, we will consider it polytheistic. Hinduism revolves around the idea of reincarnation, the idea that you will be born into another body after death, and karma, that if you do good, good will come to you. I would also remember that the hearth is in Punjab in northern India and that they do not consume beef, as they consider cows to be sacred. And in reference to the cultural landscape, you will see many temples and statues are very common in regions that practice Hinduism. For Buddhism, its hearth is close to Hinduism near Nepal, and once again, Buddhism only spread through relocation diffusion. They also believe in reincarnation and karma, and there are several branches of Buddhism, which demonstrates the concept of cultural divergence. In reference to the cultural landscapes, you will see temples and oftentimes there'll be statues of Siddhartha in the regions that practice Buddhism. And lastly, we have Sikhism, which is monotheistic and diffused through relocation and contagious diffusion, and they stress doing good over rituals. And a cultural trait that you might associate with Sikhism is the wearing of the turban for their male followers. In reference to the cultural landscape, the place of worship is known as the Gurdwara, which is generally very lavish architecture with domes and gold and white colors. It is important to note the influence that colonialism and imperialism has had on cultures, as this influenced many architectural practices and the cultures of the dominated countries. Take a look at this French architecture in Vietnam, which is a byproduct of their colonialism. When two cultures collide, it can often lead to syncretism, which is the blending of two cultural traits to form a new one. Let's utilize the French colonialism in Vietnam to demonstrate this. In French cuisine, there's a dish called pot au feu, which is a soup with veggies and beef, and this, blended with Asian ingredients, came to birth pho, which is a Vietnamese soup dish that contains veggies, beef, and rice noodle. You can even see this idea of syncretism with banh mi, another popular Vietnamese dish, which was created as a result of this collision with French culture. In reference to language, colonialism also led to the creation of new dialects, such as Pidgin and Creole, as indigenous populations were attempting to learn English during their interaction with the colonizers. Pidgin refers to the type of English that indigenous people utilize in order to communicate, and as that language gets passed down through generations, it becomes more permanent and becomes Creole. Here's an example of Hawaiian Pidgin, and notice how they recite the Lord's Prayer, and let's just read the last couple of lines. So the bad guy no can hurt us, cause you are king, and you get the real power, and you stay awesome forever. That's it. Alright, that does it for the culture unit. Don't forget to utilize the Quizlet to review the vocabulary terms, and make sure to check out the next review video, and have a fantastic day.